provider that presents me with forex trading opportunities 24 hours a day.
That's why I trade forex with IG, Australia's #1 forex provider. This program brought to you by Australia's #1 CFD and forex provider, IG, creating opportunity for over 35 years.
Taking IQ from Wall Street, encouraging data, outweighing concerns over when the Fed might taper its QE program. Don't overact. The Fed will reportedly push that message at its meeting next week, insisting a pullback on QE3 won't necessarily lead to an immediate rate hike. Western diplomats say the White House is considering a no-fly zone over Syria as Washington approves plans to provide direct military support to Syrian rebels. And Ayatollah Khamenei calls on Iranians to come out in force and vote in the presidential election, insisting Tehran does not give a damn about US concerns over the fairness of the election process. Plus, Airbus's A350 extra wide-body jet takes off on its maiden test flight, marking a major milestone in the development of the plane that will directly take on Boeing's Dreamliner.
Watching Worldwide Exchange, bringing you business news from around the globe.
Right, European equities have rebounded along with Asian equities. We'll get an insight into US futures in a moment. First, Germany is reportedly seeking to delay EU membership talks with Turkey in response to the government's crackdown on the recent unrest. This comes as the Turkish Prime Minister met with groups opposed to the redevelopment of Gezi Park in Istanbul. Following the meeting, Erdogan's spokesperson said that the project would be frozen until a court rules on its fate. For the latest on the protests and those meetings, NBC's Richard Engel now joins us from Istanbul. Richard, what's happening today?
Right now, the government is putting the decision back onto the protesters. There was a meeting yesterday between Erdogan, the Prime Minister, and representatives of the protesters. In that meeting, Erdogan and other officials said that they would put any decision about developing the park, which was, of course, the raison d'etre behind this protest movement over 2 weeks ago, to a court ruling, and then said if the court did rule in favor, saying that the development project could go ahead, that they would take yet another step and allow the people in this district around the park to vote in a kind of referendum to see if they approve the project or not. Now it is up to representatives of the park, the protesters themselves, to answer this proposal by the government. They are supposed to be meeting here in Taksim Square today and tonight. Amazingly, despite the torrential rain that we've been seeing for the last several hours, there are still protesters here. It's unclear whether they will accept these demands, whether they will reject them. And if they reject them, then it is still possible that the government could go in by force to clear out this area. I must say, most of Taksim Square is now up and running as normal. There is foot traffic, there is vehicle traffic. It is only the green area, the park, that is still a protest camp.
Richard, thanks very much indeed for that. NBC's Richard Engel with the latest in Istanbul. Leaders from 8 of the world's most powerful countries will meet at the Lochern resort in Northern Ireland for 2 days of talks which start on Monday. On the agenda, geopolitical issues such as the crisis in Syria, as well as discussions on the global economy that will focus on the 3 T's: transparency, taxation and trade. Western diplomatic sources have also told Reuters that the US is considering setting up a no-fly zone in Syria, possibly near the Jordanian border. This as President Obama gives the go-ahead for the US to provide military support to the Syrian rebels. The plan could include supplying weapons. The decision comes after the White House concluded evidence shows that the Syrian President Bashar Assad used chemical weapons against opposition forces. The UN says nearly 93,000 people have been killed since the country's conflict began more than 2 years ago. And G8 protest groups are planning a show of civil disobedience at London's Canary Wharf today. Organisers say various groups from environmentalists to anti-austerity campaigners will come together under the They Owe Us banner. Right, that's the latest on global news. Let's bring up to date with global markets. Sichuan kicks off for us in Singapore. Hi Sichuan, what happened? A better day today if you were long on the markets.
A bit of a reprieve here in Asia as yo-yoing markets bounced back up thanks to improvements in the U.S. picture. The Nikkei 225 had the most ground to make up after plunging more than 6% yesterday. It rebounded 2% despite a stronger yen versus the dollar as investors tried to buy back in on the dips. Property stocks led the way. And gains were more muted in Greater China. Mainland banks that struggled on cash crunch fears, with the finance ministry struggling to sell its 9-month notes. In Hong Kong, Xiaokou fell 7.5% to a 4.5-year low. It will be replaced on the Hang Seng after today. And elsewhere, Australia enjoyed its biggest daily gain for the ASX 200 in 17 months as investors finally shrugged off fears that the Fed would end its stimulus prematurely. And that's your Asian Market Minute.
Right, that was the wrap from Asia. Let's bring up to speed with how that's translating into the futures right now. Currently, the Dow is some 40 points above fair value. The Nasdaq at the moment is some 5.5 points above fair value. The S&P at the moment is around 4 points above fair value after rebounding yesterday up 1.5%. The Dow up 180 points, 1.2% higher. That means the CMC Global 300 at the moment is about 1/3% higher. European stocks, this is where we stand. The FTSE actually, in the end, was up yesterday only by 5 points, although it's been 4 down days for European stocks generally. Up 0.5% at the moment, 0.75% higher for Central DAX. The EBEX up 0.5%. We have seen lower bond yields for Italy and Spain. The FTSE MIB, as you can see, underperforming at the moment, fairly flat. Now, meanwhile, PIMCO CEO Mohamed El Erian has weighed in on Japan's market volatility. Speaking on CNBC, he's given his take on the market's disappointment at the Bank of Japan.
I think the market is rightly questioning the effectiveness of the Bank of Japan, not the willingness, but the effectiveness. And doing so for a number of reasons. First, we yet to hear about the structural reforms. Remember, central bank liquidity is a bridge. You need the destination. That's about structural reform and growth. Second, Japan is trying to do a lot and can only do that through capturing demand from other countries. And finally, the initial conditions are the worst possible.
This comes as the Fed will reportedly try to use next week's policy meeting to provide a soothing voice for investors. Chatter about the Fed pulling back on its bond buying program has pushed bond yields higher. They are lower today.